Good evening to you all, and welcome to the Monday, November 8th, 2021 meeting of the Falls Church City Council. We're delighted you all can join us this evening. I would ask to start the meeting, if you would please be so kind as to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Can you all hear me, by the way, with the mask and all? Good. Great. You may regret that by the end of the evening, but anyway. Madam Clerk, will you call roll, please?
Yes, sir. Ms. Conley?
Here.
Mr. Duncan?
Here.
Ms. Hardy?
Here.
Mr. Litkenhouse?
Here.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott will be a little bit late. She's at a work event. Mr. Snyder?
Here.
And Mayor Tarter?
Here.
Thank you.
All right. Let's move on to the meeting agenda. Do we have a motion to adopt the meeting agenda, perhaps?
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt the meeting agenda.
All right. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor? Say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. We have a meeting agenda. So we've got a few proclamations. We're going to start the evening with a few special proclamations, and some of my colleagues are going to read those. So the first one is a proclamation declaring November 11th as Tomb of the Unknown Soldier Day here in Falls Church. And Mr. Snyder is going to do the honors. Mr. Snyder?
Thank you. Whereas on Veterans Day, on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 2021, Americans will pause to recognize those who have sacrificed and those who will sacrifice in the future in the defense of America's freedom and democracy. And whereas the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier at Arlington National Cemetery was established 100 years ago in 1921 as the final resting place for an unknown soldier from World War I, and whereas remains from subsequent years were later added to represent all missing and unknown service members who made the ultimate sacrifice for our freedoms. And whereas the unknown soldier of World War I was transported to the United States and lay in state at the Capitol Rotunda, after which President Warren G. Harding officiated at the internment ceremonies of the unknown soldier at Arlington National Cemetery on November 11, 1921. And whereas the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier features a sculpted panel of 3 Greek figures representing peace, victory, and valor, 6 sculpted wreaths representing the 6 major campaigns of World War I, and an inscription reading, "Here rests in honored glory an American soldier known but to God." And whereas the 3rd U.S. Infantry, the Old Guard, is the oldest active duty infantry unit in the Army, serving since 1784. And whereas since World War II, the Old Guard has served as the official Army honor guard and the escort to the President, and has the honor of maintaining the 24-hour vigil at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And whereas it is fitting and proper to accord official recognition to the 100th anniversary of the establishment of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Arlington Cemetery, as we honor our veterans on this Veterans Day.
Now, therefore, I, David Tarter, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, do hereby proclaim Thursday, November 11th, 2021 as Tomb of the Unknown Soldier Day in the City of Falls Church, and ask our citizens to honor our veterans in Falls Church and the centennial of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Arlington Cemetery. Do we have any veterans here in the audience, perchance? All right, please, why don't you stand and we can just give you a round of applause and give you our thanks for your service. If you'd like, you can even come up. Would you like to come up and get a picture with the proclamation with us?
And we do also have some representatives from the Daughters of the American Revolution who have joined us.
Oh, okay, fantastic. Why don't you all come forward? And if you're welcome to say a few words if you'd like. I'm sorry, I didn't know you all were here. Why don't you go ahead and say your remarks, then we'll come to a quick photo.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Tarter and members of the City Council. I'm Lisa Maloney, and I'm the regent of the Falls Church DAR, and there are 2 additional DAR members here with me. The nation pauses this year to salute the 100th anniversary of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier at Arlington National Cemetery, 1921 to 2021. DAR is proud to be partnering with the Society of the Honor Guard, Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, to ensure that this special centennial is respectfully and properly observed. Falls Church Chapter presented a wonderful program describing the history of the tomb and the sentinels who stand eternal vigil. Our district participated in a wreath laying at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier a week ago, and individuals have signed up to participate in the public flower laying during the next 2 days. Falls Church Chapter DAR would like to thank you again for recognizing the 100th anniversary of this American symbol of remembrance.
Thank you. Thank you so much, all of you. Why don't you come forward and we can go ahead and do a picture, and thank you for helping us celebrate and remember our veterans. All right, thanks again. All right, our next proclamation is declaring November 2021 as Native American Heritage Month, and Vice Mayor Connolly is going to do the honors. So, Vice Mayor Connolly?
Whereas the history and culture of our nation have been significantly influenced by American Indians and Indigenous peoples, and whereas the contributions of American Indians and Alaska Natives have enhanced the freedom, prosperity, and greatness of America today, and whereas their customs and traditions are respected and celebrated as part of a rich legacy throughout the United States, and whereas Native American Awareness Week began in 1976 and recognition was expanded by Congress and approved by President George Bush in August 1990, designating the entire month of America as National American Indian Heritage Month, and whereas in honor of National American Indian Heritage Month, community celebrations as well as numerous cultural, artistic, educational, and historical activities have been planned. And whereas it is important to recognize the contributions of American Indians and Alaska Natives who served in the armed forces at 5 times the national average. And whereas this observance is also a time to acknowledge the many American Indians and Alaska Natives who are members of federal, state, local, and tribal law enforcement and who sacrifice their safety for the security of all.
Now, therefore, I, David Tarter, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, do hereby proclaim the month of November 2021 as Native American Heritage Month in the City of Falls Church, and ask all residents to observe this month with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities. Thank you.
And we do have, Ms. Maloney is going to be accepting that.
Oh, okay,
from the DA.
fantastic. So let me go ahead and give that one. Oh, do you have something else to say? Sure, please, go ahead.
Thank you very much. This was not our proclamation, as you know, but we're very happy to add commentary to the proclamation. Thank you very much for the proclamation for Native American Heritage Month. The Falls Church Chapter Daughters of the American Revolution would like to add that the national, state, and chapter-level DAR American Indians committees are entrusted to the continuing education and history and culture of this community, as well as the support of the educational and cultural pursuits of its citizens. DAR supports 2 American Indian colleges, awards scholarships, and donates to needs lists. Our chapter and members of the Children of the American Revolution recently participated in a National Museum of the American Indian educational event where students were encouraged to put themselves in the places of Native Americans. Also, at a recent meeting, Falls Church Chapter highlighted Native American regional cuisine. Thank you again for paying tribute to the rich ancestry and traditions of Native Americans.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to go to our last proclamation, which is declaring November 2021 as Live Local Month here in Falls Church, and Mr. Lichtenhouse is going to do the honors. Ross?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whereas the City of Falls Church is proud to join with the Falls Church Chamber of Commerce to encourage residents to take the Live Local pledge and patronize local businesses in Falls Church, and whereas local businesses in the Falls Church Chamber of Commerce are challenging residents and businesses to pledge to keep 20% more of their spending in the City of Falls Church during the month of November 2021. And whereas living local creates prosperity because of the multiplier effect. When local people choose to buy products and services from local businesses, creating diverse job opportunities and strengthening the city's overall economy. And whereas shopping, eating, playing, creating, and doing business in the city adds to the local tax revenue base, which supports city schools, roads, and other city services. And whereas living local can be healthier for the environment because doing business locally often results in less traffic congestion and pollution. And whereas living local can be healthier for residents because it makes daily activities less stressful and encourages walking to local businesses. And whereas living local supports neighbors and local businesses while also building stronger relationships and a sense of community. And whereas living local helps to strengthen and preserve the fabric of Falls Church's unique business community while attracting new businesses to serve local residents and the community at large. And whereas supporting local businesses is even more important as those businesses and the community as a whole meet the challenges presented by the COVID-19 emergency.
Now, therefore, I, David Tarter, Mayor of the City of Falls Church, Virginia, do hereby proclaim the month of November 2021 as Live Local Month in the City of Falls Church and urge all residents to take the Live Local pledge, attend some of the many Live Local events offered by local businesses during the month, and participate in the Live Local campaign by tagging local businesses and events on social media. All right, and I know we got some folks here from the Chamber. We'd like to welcome you on, offer you the opportunity to say a few words, and to thank you for the great work you all do for our community.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. I'm Elise Benson, the Executive Director of the Falls Church Chamber of Commerce. I'm delighted to be here and to support Live Local Falls Church. I do have our Chairman of the Board, Barbara Benson, here, and Joe Wetzel, a board member, and my right-hand person here, Kathy Solstice. We thank you very much, and we do encourage the community to shop local. There are so many valuable opportunities, and the proclamation, Ross, you covered it all the bright spots that are to be in Falls Church. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Why don't you come forward? We can give you the proclamation and maybe get a quick photo. I want to thank also Mr. Lichtenhouse for being a champion of Live Local for all these years. So greatly appreciate it.
Thank you guys very much.
All right, Madam Clerk, I understand we might have a few oaths of office to administer tonight.
I know we have Mr. Hunter Hicks, who's joining the Historical Commission here with us this evening.
Is there anyone else here as well, in addition to Mr. Hicks? All right, why don't you come on down, and the clerk will administer the oaths of office, and you can get our thanks as well for your service to our community.
Oh, I guess I need to be near this microphone, sorry. Raise your right hand. Do you, Hunter Hicks, solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon you as a member of the Historical Commission according to the best of your ability, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, and
Bring him.
Yeah, we will. All right, why don't you come on down, and we can give you our thanks for your service to our community. Mr. Snyder?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just, as a liaison to the Historical Commission, I just wanted to thank Hunter particularly for his contributions already and look forward to many more in the future. This is a community with a long and proud history, and we appreciate already the efforts that you put forward and look forward to your contributions in the future. So thank you very much.
All right, let's go on to receipt of public comment. Madam Clerk, would you like to summarize the written comments?
Yes, sir. The following wrote in support of using ARPA funds for stormwater mitigation at the Broadway, 502 West Broad Street. W. Frederick Thompson, resident of the Broadway condominium, wrote on behalf of the 80 residences and 4 commercial businesses at the Broadway. He provided 2 sets of comments that you did receive. We had individual correspondence from the following from the Broadway: Margaret Finarelli, Alvin Pesakowitz, Carrie Smoot, Lily Smoot, Nancy Ingrasano, Jenny Schiffer, Ellen Salisbury, Doris Pinello, Jim Kelly, Margot Kelly, Kathleen Levitz, Eleanor Joseph Cripps, Harry Rosetto, Grace Rosetto, Andrew Siegel, Penny Siegel, Richard Levine, Susan Levine, John Kramer, Liza Kramer, Leslie Wilder, Tracy Wilder, Dick Nathan, Jane Nelson, David Nelson, Sarah Fitzgerald, Lawrence Mason, Roseanne Kistler, Peter E. Petrucci, MD, Henry J. Gordon, Henriette M. Gordon, Jerry Kamens and Nancy Kamens, Roy Vanderbilt, Barbara Vanderbilt, Kathleen O. Thompson, Barry DeMaio, Judith Katz, Sheldon Katz, Sandy Mitchell, Larry Hendricks, Stacy Hendricks, and Martha Mahan Haynes.
I think I missed one of those in the middle.
Would you like me to read those again?
Yeah.
And those were all of these comments were received by council in advance, and they do get a paper copy as well, or a digital copy. Other comments on ARPA funding, Tina Ehrman wrote with some questions about the use of ARPA funding for COVID testing and vaccination and PPE. And she asked how funds might be used for stormwater improvements. She also commented that parks and tennis courts might be a lower priority as compared to some of the other needs. We did receive a letter from Treasurer Jody Acosta, who wrote to request reinstatement of employee raises and departmental budgets that were restricted during COVID and possible bonuses for those employees working through the pandemic. Phil Christensen of 343 James Street asked council to lift the city employee salary freeze retroactively if possible, review the city's salary structure against current market-based benchmarks, and commit to restoring full staffing levels at competitive salaries before allocating any budget surplus to other priorities, including tax cuts. The city's Employee Advisory Council requested that City Council restore staff's 3.5% increase from FY21 using budget surplus funds, give employee bonuses using ARPA funds, and complete a citywide compensation study and evaluation of staffing levels. In other items, plastic bag tax comments, Christian Demeter of 611 Greenwich Street does not support a plastic bag tax. As far as our public hearings we have tonight, we had a comment from the Human Services Advisory Council supporting the proposed charter amendment to remove citizenship requirements for city board and commission members. And the Historical Commission supports the proposed naming of the city property yard as the Robert L. Goff Operations Yard, and that is also a public hearing this evening. In other correspondence, Sean Dakin provided supported cameras at every intersection and provided some information about that. Adrian Varner asked for increased enforcement of the traffic laws at the intersection of Broad and West Streets. And that was it.
All right, thank you very much. And I understand we have at least one public speaker here today.
3. I actually
Okay.
have 3. So first we have W. Frederick Thompson, and then on deck we have Swati Ghosh.
All right.
And I will let you know that we are using a timer system, and so if you want to come up this way, we used it just before we went away for COVID, and so you get to be the first one to use it as well.
Wow, okay.
It kind of gives you an idea. You have 3 minutes to speak, and you'll get a yellow light when you have 30 seconds left. So.
So I will not take a long time. I just wanted to make sure that I highlighted a few points. issued or really provided with the council with two papers, one which gives a background and history about what we've experienced at the Broadway, and also talks about engineering consultants that we brought on board and what we learned through that process. The fundamental part of what we learned is there's fundamental issues with the way our building was designed. It was really designed to handle about a 3¼ inch storm, and that is not a high-intensity storm these days. Higher intensity storms are happening. Also, we discovered that the city system is not really adequate to take the water out of our building the way it needs to occur, and we're experiencing flooding on Broad Street, and we are having also water backing up in our building. The extent of it we really can't fully determine, but our concern is, as we look forward to what we're going to do at the Broadway and what we're going to invest in, we want to make sure that what we invest in delivers the product and that it isn't thwarted is the best word I guess I can come up with the way the city system handles us. And so we want to really encourage the city to work with us to engineer solutions that can work in the area to control, mitigate the water flow, and allow us to have free access. Let me just highlight a couple points. Last September of 2020, there was a letter from Zach Bradley, who was the interim public works director at that time, talking about the issues of stormwater and the need to either replace each pipe periodically, which he said was far too expensive, or provide some kind of stormwater mitigation. And that was really the alternative suggested. That's really what we're asking the city to cooperate with us on. Either approach is expensive. And this is one reason we think ARPA is the way to approach this, because otherwise we'd be bringing massive bonds to the city. The city would have to pass massive bonds. Here we have money available that can be used in this area, and we really believe this is the time to do it. It really takes leadership from the city council to do it. It's not something that people choosing freely, would they like a park or would they like water management? Most people would pick a park. In fact, there are 18 categories in the survey the city's doing, and I'm sure many of them sound more attractive than stormwater management, but I would suggest, and I do suggest in here, kind of a citizen bill of rights, water management bill of rights, if you will, that every citizen of Falls Church, whether in a residential neighborhood or a condo or apartment complex, should be able to sleep through a storm at night without fear that their unit would be damaged by preventable flooding. Every citizen should know that stormwater pipe leaving their home is not blocked by an inadequate city system, and no citizen should have their sidewalks and streets overwhelmed on a regular basis by high-intensity storms. I was looking for a quote from the mayor from last September, because I know he spoke to some of this, but what I really discovered were the typical council meetings were running 4.5 to 6 hours. So I have to say I respect and honor you for the effort that you're putting into being city council members, because it's not a trivial enterprise. Let me just finish by saying that I think these investments to our system are long-term, one-time, and that's what I view ARPA for. There are 4 categories of expenses there, and I really think that we should focus on what is in the law and what is the purpose of the law, which is to recover from COVID and to build long-lasting infrastructure.
All right, thank you so much. Mr. Shields, maybe you could, during your remarks, if you have anything to add to that, please speak to it if you're able at this point. Our next speaker, Madam Clerk.
Yes, we have Swati Ghosh.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Swati Ghosh, and here's my colleague Hannah Jordan. We both are volunteers with Welcoming Falls Church. We first want to thank you, Mayor Tarter, Councilmember Hardy, and Councilmember Hiscott for attending the Diwali celebrations at Cherry Hill Park last week. It was the first event of its kind in the city. We certainly hope it wasn't the last, and we want to thank you for your support and encouragement. Today we are here to talk about housing affordability in the city of Falls Church. We feel it is a huge factor and, in fact, a big challenge that the city faces in achieving its Vision 2040 of making our community more welcoming to all. There are several things that the city can do and explore to move the needle on this front. First, one of the items on the City Council's agenda today is the vote on removing the citizenship requirement or the permanent resident green card requirement from the list of eligibility criteria for affordable dwelling units in the city. We are fully in support of this initiative, and one we believe would be helpful in making our city more diverse and equitable in outcomes towards immigrants and refugees. Several of my Welcoming Falls Church colleagues spoke on this topic at your last council meeting, and others have also registered public comment. We are convinced that this is a small but symbolic step that would send a signal to the community about how welcoming we can be. By removing these immigration-related criteria will not result in immigrants and refugees skipping the line, but just simply allow them to join the line. Second, we also support a creative dialogue about policies that can move the needle on affordable housing, such as utilizing federal funding from ARPA to increase the supply of affordable housing in the city, be it through city-owned or Housing Commission-owned public housing for low and middle-income residents, or through rent vouchers to subsidize rents in otherwise market-rate apartment buildings. Making the city more affordable is going to be beneficial for all. For a community that is blessed with abundance and bounty, sharing that prosperity with those that have lost everything, such as the Afghan refugees, is the right thing to do. Providing these families the opportunity to afford a home in the city can be a great first step. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we have
you.
Sean Dakin.
All right, Mr. Taken.
This thing goes. All right.
Good, go ahead and start.
All
A
right,
little
thanks.
slow on the
Thanks
other.
so much. I just want to, I guess I was listening to the proclamations, and the live local kind of goes to what I'm talking about. I had my written comments, but around, I think we want to live local. Hopefully we don't want to die local. And I don't want to bring us down, but I'm really here to say that I think we could do a lot with putting traffic management and automating traffic management so that we have red light cameras or whatever kind of cameras technology can give us at the main intersections across Falls Church City. I've been here about 10 years. I walk around the city on a daily basis multiple times, and I'm almost hit multiple times a week as many people here also have the same issue. My particular issue is the fact that my wife is a physician at Kaiser. We live over by Larry Graves on Hillwood and Cherry, and she used to regularly walk to work. It's not very far. It's about a 10-minute walk to work. She doesn't like to walk to work anymore because of the constant problems of her almost getting hit at the intersection of Washington and Broad. And I know there's no traffic enforcement there. And so I would love to give our short-staffed and underfunded police a lot more interesting things to do rather than traffic enforcement. And if we could automate traffic enforcement, then our police could be doing things that we all need and love because they are an amazing staff force here. Also, I'm on the Transportation Committee, and big issue is getting our kids to be able to walk to school. But I know a lot of parents don't want their kids to walk to school because they don't feel it's safe, right? So if we could automate traffic enforcement, make Falls Church City the city where if you do run the red light, you will get a ticket, that would be a really good reputation to have. It would also allow people to walk to restaurants and to stores, which they might not want to do right now because of the traffic enforcement. So anyway, I'm here to say that I think we need to heavily automate traffic enforcement, and that would be a wonderful thing. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Snyder.
Thank you much. I wanted you to know, Sean, that the Legislative Committee will be recommending to Richmond a significant expansion of the very limited authority now we have to put in red light running cameras and speed enforcement cameras. And I know city staff is working on fully implementing the authority that we have. So we got your message, and we're going to act on it. The problem is that Richmond, the state government, has made it extremely difficult to put these in. So we're going to ask for a much greater capability to do exactly what you've asked to do. So that's part of our effort, as well as fully utilizing the limited authority that we now have. So thanks again for raising those issues. And I know a lot of council members fully support that.
Ms. Hiscott?
I just wanted to reiterate that I too am on the legislative committee, and today I was walking from my office building on 150 South Washington to the vaccination clinic that Clarendon's was hosting, which is a great way to live local and keep COVID and everything together. But just crossing over Broad and Wash, there were 3 cars that went through a red light turning left from Washington onto Broad as I was crossing. I mean, I sat and counted them, and it reiterated the fact to me that we just need to do something at that intersection. And I think everybody up here agrees on that. To the extent we are able to, we want to do that. So thank you for bringing that up. And my experience just reiterates that literally just within the past couple of hours.
All right, thank you. On this topic or just general council comments?
Both.
Okay, so let's move. Yeah, we're moving on to council comments. So Ms. Hardy?
So on that note, Mr. Shields, when we talk about the CIP update, I know transportation and pedestrian improvements is a big part of our work plan. So let's make sure we talk about what we are doing with our the authority that we do have on that one. Can I continue on other requests or?
Of course.
So one was just actually a comment. So I wanted to give kudos to the CPADS team for the East End planning meeting that happened this weekend. I was really pleased to see, number one, the diversity and the really good turnout, probably one of the best and highest meeting turnouts I've seen. And I credit that to staff's work on getting everything translated to Vietnamese and specific outreach to the Eden Center and its businesses. So kudos to staff. Let's keep up that kind of outreach, because I really do think going directly to the people brings the outcomes that we want by making sure we have more diversity at the table. So thank you.
All right, other comments? All right, let's move on then to, I'm sorry, Vice Mayor Connolly.
I just wanted to say a thank you to the Electoral Board. I know they worked a lot of hours in preparing for this election. It was very peaceful and well-run in Falls Church, and they deserve a few days off after that huge effort. So thanks to all of them.
All right. So let's move on now to the report of the city manager, Mr. Shields.
Thank you, Mayor Tarter, members of council. I'll make just a few comments, and then we do have some other staff reports that we'd like to include in the city manager's report. Just to start things off, though, to take the note from Councilmember or Vice Mayor Mary Beth Connolly, I just wanted to, on behalf of city staff, congratulate all the candidates who ran for public office in this last election for the city council and the school board. In particular, and congratulations to Vice Mayor Connolly, Councilmember Hiscott, Councilmember Snyder, and Councilmember-elect Caroline Leon. We look forward to working with you all on your next term. The next thing to report is Veterans Day is this Thursday, November 11th, and I want to welcome everybody to the Falls Church Veterans Memorial, right there in front of the community center, where we will have our Veterans Day ceremony at 11 a.m. All are welcome. And then at tonight's meeting, there was a comment about the stormwater issues at the Broadway, and I did want to just respond briefly to note that the report from the Broadway has been referred to the city engineer. He is reviewing it, and we will be in touch with the Broadway Homeowners Association to discuss its findings. Next up on the city manager's report, we do have an update on the Fields Apartments, and then following that, we'll have a report to the City Council on the quarterly update on progress on capital improvements programs, and then we'll wrap things up with a brief summary of progress on the council work plan. So this will be a longer than usual city manager's report, and I beg your forgiveness in advance, but hopefully this will be good substantive information that's useful for the council and the community. For this first item, the update on the Fields Apartments, We are joined on this call by our Housing and Human Services Director, Nancy Vincent, and our Deputy Housing and Human Services Director, Dana Lewis. Ms. Lewis in particular has spurred outreach between the residents and the management of the Fields Apartments to try to facilitate the resolution of issues that the residents have raised to the city's attention. And let me allow Ms. Lewis, if she might just speak briefly to this issue and any next steps on this. The council did ask for a report on this with the Kettler Management firm. They were not able to join tonight, but we could give a brief staff update. Ms. Lewis, would you like to provide that update?
Yes, good evening. I'm here. Sorry. Good evening, Council. So we've been working very closely with both the residents and the and Kettler Management. We had the meeting last month, and Kettler has hired a new staff. They have a new regional manager, and she in turn hired a new property manager and also a new maintenance person. So the way this began is the city received a letter from tenants at the Fields. We had heard informally about various items that were going on, but tenants felt empowered to write a letter to the Housing Commission. And in this letter, these were some of the items that they detailed. Mainly, they talked about mold, especially during the winter. They talked about how doors were loose, being able to get in easily, cracks, bad windows, non-functioning equipment. A big issue that's been coming up for years is the subject of mice. And this started a while back when holes were drilled into the building to put in Verizon cables. And so some carpets needed to be replaced, just various maintenance issues that were going on with the property. So as a result of this, we decided to hold a community forum at Berman Park across the street. We also spoke with Kettler and sent them the letter that the residents sent, had it translated into English. They sent a response letter, which is attached. So you have the letter from the tenants and the letter that Kettler submitted. And they wanted to let us know that they're taking, the complaints seriously. And with that in mind, they made the staff changes. And so at the forum, it was a large number of tenants, over 20 residents were there. It was outside. They gave a lot of feedback. They talked about the mice. They talked about how how rents had been raised, and they didn't understand that pricing method. It was just a number of items that came up. They also talked about rent prices for units of varying sizes that were all being marketed the same. And so as a result of that meeting, we also invited an attorney from Legal Services of Northern Virginia who came, and he shared what tenants can do when they feel like that things are not being taken care of where they live. He outlined how you could not pay your rent and then go to the court and hold that rent and then pay it after after repairs have been done, and gave them other advice like that. And we gave everyone their number in case they needed legal advice. And after that, we went to, and one other item that came up is the need for covered bike racks. Many more children are riding their bikes to school this year. And so Kettler took all of these things into account, the letter and also concerns that residents raised at the meeting. Was really hoping they were going to be here this evening because they have made a lot of progress. And I'll just say that they have hired a new pest control company. They've hired Orkin. They're working closely with Fairfax County. Fairfax County gave them details of what needed to be done. They have a checklist. They're following that checklist. The first thing they did was hire a new company. And then they, so here's, let's see, this is a letter that was given early on before the community forum. So I'm speaking on things that they have done since the last community forum, which was almost 30 days ago. And so they also have a facilities team that has gone in every unit. We've heard that from tenants, and they've done, a checklist for each individual unit, what needs to be done. And so they are taking steps to make all of those. Can you hear me? I'm sorry. Okay. They're taking steps.
Speak up just a bit, though. It's a little bit hard to hear you. We can't hear you, but I don't know if it's possible to speak up just a touch.
Oh, sure. Has it been like that the whole time? I'm sorry.
It's okay. If we listen hard, we can hear you. I don't know if our technical people can turn up the volume just a little bit. It'd be nice if we could make it just a little bit easier for people to hear.
I'm very sorry. I didn't realize.
It's fine, but it's just a touch hard for the old folks like myself here in the audience to fully hear everything.
Okay.
Yeah,
Did you hear it? Okay. Did you hear anything that I said? I just want to make sure that you...
Satisfactorily. Thank you, Dana.
Okay, great. So I won't do it all over again. So yes, and then also they put the covered bike rack in their budget for next year. They so I think starting in like January, February next year, they'll be building a covered bike rack. So much has been done. They've outlined 3 units where they're going to have to, they went inside, the Orkin went into every unit as far as the mice, and they advised some tenants of things that they needed to do that would also assist with keeping rodents out. So they've sealed off holes outside the building and inside in the washrooms and that type of thing, and they also are doing things in each individual unit. They're reviewing their policies on rent, and they are going to come to council so that you can ask them questions and also give you any other, updates on what they're doing. So if you have any questions for me, but from what we've seen, a lot of progress has been made. It doesn't appear to have been repercussions for the tenants coming to the meeting, so that's also a good thing. That was a fear that was shared with us. That doesn't seem to be the case. And so it looks like we've made a lot of progress. That's in a large part to the Housing Commission and to the council. Councilwoman Hardy was really instrumental in this. And schools employees have been working with us to get residents out and make sure they get the information. So I think everybody working together has really been moving this the process along. And on one last thing, they are individually treating units for mold as well.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Lewis, and I want to make sure we thank you as well for all your efforts in coordinating and just getting folks together to try to help resolve these issues. We do have some comments, I know, and some questions, so we're going to start with Ms. Hardy, if we could.
Great. Thank you, Dana, for staying on top of this. It sounds good that they're making some progress, but I have to express my disappointment in Kettler bailing at the last minute and not joining us tonight, because I think part of it is that we wanted to hear directly from them on what progress they've been making. And so I'd like to make sure we keep this at the forefront, so let's extend an invitation for them to join us next week. Luckily, we meet almost every Monday night, so I'd love to see Kettler here. I guess the question I have is, given that it's been almost 30 days, as you said, since we had this meeting on October 12th, there at the community, do we think that things have been resolved? It sounds like they're starting to make progress, but I think what we heard from the attorney at Legal Services Northern Virginia, especially in the case of mold, landlords have 5 business days to address it, and we are way past that mark. And if they are just beginning remediation on it, frankly, that's just unacceptable. I think no one should be living in those conditions. And so I'd like to make sure we keep up the pressure by inviting Kettler to our next discussion and following up. And then my second point is I would like to know whether it's appropriate for us to make sure there's health inspectors. I know we leverage Fairfax County for that. And given that we've given, at least this point now, more than 30 days since the residents contacted us, is the next appropriate step to bring in health inspectors to make sure there's additional kind of enforcement behind this concern?
All right, thank you. Other comments, questions from council? Mr. Duncan, then Vice Mayor Connolly.
Just one quick one. So Kettler's raising the rent, which I don't want to encourage them to do, but if they are going to do that, I'm trying to draw a line between that and the money that we have in ARPA to provide rent relief. Is there some way that the folks who live there can be assured that if they are having trouble paying their rents, that there is a resource that we have at the city's disposal to help them?
Yes, we're working with many residents. Well, not as many we had in the past, but any resident at the fields that needs assistance with paying their rent, and it's COVID related or tied to COVID in some way, we can assist them with their rent. And they know that the property manager has, they have themselves applied for people to get rental assistance. As far as the raising of the rents, I think I'd mentioned this before, but tax credit properties have, a threshold of rent that they can charge, and they've not exceeded that. As a matter of fact, they're not close to it actually. So the amount of rent that the increase that they have made is allowable. So we don't really have any, we can't really do any enforcement or anything like that on that piece because they are not above the allowable tax credit rent for their property. And they did not do a rent increase last year because of COVID. So it's 2 years later and, they're doing the rent increase now, but they did not do a rent increase last year. And most properties that we're dealing with have all done a rent increase this year, but they didn't do one last year. And I'm not sure if I got your second part of your question. I'm not sure.
That responds, I think. I just want to second Ms. Hardy's motion that we invite Kettler back and hear from him before the holidays, particularly as it relates to the bike shelter. I mean, oh my goodness me, can it really take that long? I know that contractors are in short supply, but big outfit like Kettler, I would hope that they would be able to get a bike shelter up. Well, I'd like to hear from them when they actually think that they can get the thing done, because one of the issues you do have over there is a lot of folks got to get to their jobs, and there's a lot of vehicles around. Anything we could do to encourage bicycle use and riding in that neighborhood in particular would be to the benefit of the whole community. Thanks.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Connolly?
I just wanted to second what Ms. Hardy said about following up with Kettler, thanking Ms. Lewis for her work on this and encouraging her to continue along, and I too would like to see them here as soon as possible.
All right, thank you. Other comments? I might ask just quickly, so we've heard there's maybe some progress. Have you heard from the tenants? What are they saying?
Word that we've heard from tenants is that they definitely went in every unit and did that checklist that I talked about with items that need to be replaced. And we've heard that progress is being made. We've heard that from several tenants. So that's a good thing. And like you said, I mean, a lot more needs to be done. But one thing that they really appreciate is the new property manager who's there. She's much more approachable, and people feel like they can go into the office and make a complaint, and she walks the property pretty much every other day, which didn't happen before. And so that is a big step. And also the new facilities team. They have a new facilities team that's on site, and they've talked about that as well. So those are good things that we've heard.
All right, thank you. Other comments about this matter? Okay, if not, let's move on to the next item, Mr. Shields.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Lewis, for your work on this. Cindy Mester, our Deputy City Manager, will give a report on our capital improvements program.
Good evening, Council, and I'm joined by Kason Sosby, who is the right hand in helping on our CIP tracking. And we're still having audio problems.
It's just a bit light. We can't hear you very well.
All right, how's this one? Okay, because if I turn it up there, we'll blast you out, so we'll try to keep a balance. Caitlin Sosby is on the Teams meeting with me, and she has helped in preparing this quarterly update. We also recently did an update to the Planning Commission. What you have in the packet this evening is a summary of where we are in the 25 projects that we're actively working. And we've made great progress even during the challenges of COVID and some challenges in supply, but I really appreciate the staff keeping up and working on it.
Ms. Mester, I might ask if you just put the microphone a little bit closer. It's still a little bit hard, at least for some of us, to hear.
It would be the dais one, Wyatt, to up. and the table mic. How is this, Mayor? I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm 6 feet away from everybody, so I'm going to try this momentarily just so you all can hear me. 17 of the 25 projects are green and progressing on schedule. 6 are yellow. Some of those are funding issues. Are we hearing me okay? Otherwise, I'll switch to the podium mic, the other one. We did highlight some recent accomplishments with some photos so we could celebrate the Meridian High School opening, the Dew Trails, and of course, the Mary Riley Stiles Library. Council had recently updated and approved some grant applications, and they were separate resolutions, but for the ease of having them consolidated in this report, we did re-include that at line 55, so you can see the revenue sharing grant applications that we've recently submitted. We are starting the process of developing the next CIP. That'll be presented to the Planning Commission in February, and then the city manager will present to council in March. As part of that, the Planning Commission last year had asked that we add an environmental impact lens to the CIP analysis along with the equity lens that council had encouraged last year. So we are working on developing that, and that will be part of the CIP projects that come forward for Planning Commission, Council, and the community's review. So we would have the equity lens and the environmental impact lens for every project that's being proposed in the CIP. The attachment to the CIP memo includes the snapshot that we've been providing to you all quarterly. It's set up, as you know, with the sort of traffic signal approach. So green is go and good, yellow is some caution, red is an issue, and blue, I needed another color, and blue celebrates what's been completed. The next quarterly report will drop any blues that show up this time. Not going to highlight all of those, although staff today or later will be available for questions. Did want to comment on the positive progress with a couple, Fairman Park being one, and that is we've held a good community meeting in September and got a lot of good community engagement, including from the residents of Fields that you were just discussing. The plans there are at 30%. So we're continuing a review on that so we can proceed. Park Avenue, Great Street, which is an important one for the parallel street to Broad Street and of course runs in front of City Hall campus, is at 15% designs, and this will go from the library at North Virginia to North Washington, which would be full pedestrian walkability sidewalks, crosswalks, intersections, improving some of the intersection designs, and undergrounding utilities, which, as we experience today, is an important factor in the city of Falls Church. South Washington Transit Plaza is really progressing well. Over the next couple of weeks, you'll see the street tree planters being finished, road paving, and the new signal poles are expected in November. And I'm excited to say that the historic panels are currently being fabricated, and this has been a long time coming in terms of design and content, so we're very excited about that milestone. We met last week with VDOT regarding Oak Street Bridge. That one, the project has 100% designs on, all the right-of-way has been completed, and VDOT has certified those items. And now we will be working with VDOT to actually do the administration of that project so we could expedite it sooner than later as a result of some of the funding delays at the state level from COVID. So we are progressing on that one. And the last two that I would highlight is Greenways down. This is the last big NTC project that's in the queue, and this is the one that's federally funded. As council will recall, it's including 6 streets, a lot of neighbors. We've done some communications with each of the streets to get working group members from each of them to represent their street, and then that'll be formed into a larger stakeholder group so we coordinate the efforts and don't have unintended consequences. And by March of next year, we'll have 30% plans submitted to VDOT. So we're currently working with the consultant to do some early concept plans based on the community survey so that we can work with the working group members on some of those designs before we submit to VDOT for review. That's a required review because of the federal funding from VDOT. And the last project was on the last page of the attachment. It's the LED streetlight conversion. Lionel Menard will be the project manager on that, and now that we're wrapping up the library, he's actively starting the work on this one, which is included meeting with Dominion last week and this week for the processes to order stuff and also to see what we need to do so we can identify the streets that will be the pilot project location that'll pick a variety of residential and commercial areas. And once we get some rough plans in place, then we can circle back for staff and council awareness. So that's a highlight of a lot of good work happening on 25 active projects. And of course, as we're looking at the ARPA funding and some of those projects, we'll look at what's in the CIP, what needs to be adjusted, and you'll see that reflected in the next CIP when it comes to you in March. Glad to answer any questions now or as a follow-up if you have questions later.
All right, I think we got some questions now. We're going to start with Ms. Hardy.
Great. Thank you, Cindy. This is one of my favorite topics, mainly because I think it's always so, it's obvious to our community kind of where their tax dollar goes, seeing these investments in the community. So thank you for all the good updates. A broader question first before I dive into the specific ones. We talked a lot about the staffing challenges. Are we seeing impacts of CIP delivery because of those challenges, or should we start expecting projects to be delayed because of that?
At this point, staffing is not impacting current projects. We are looking really closely, however, as we look to incorporate any new ARPA projects. What do we need for staffing in terms of that to keep the projects on track? The biggest area of need, and you saw that in the first budget amendment and you see it in the second one, is contracts and procurement management, because we have a bottleneck at that piece, and a lot of our transportation and ARPA will be federally procured. So we're looking very closely at that.
Okay. So one of the top questions I get is South Washington, and it sounds like it is, fingers crossed, on track for December finally to be done.
Correct.
And we feel good about that.
Yes, we had a good CIP project review meeting today, and the project manager, Sue Long, is feeling that is a manageable plan. I will note we did find just this week an unexpected pipe that's running next to the taxi cab that didn't show up between taxi cab and Coleman Power Sports. It didn't show up on any missed utilities or test pits. So we're making sure it doesn't delay the project. It may have to shift some of where benches and things are located.
Yep. Okay. I was surprised by, I think the delivery date or planned delivery date for the Greenway Downs traffic calming project is March 2024. Is that correct? Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, that's been the sort of the design and the funding plan so that we allow for sufficient enough community engagement as well.
Yeah, so I know that the community is really excited to have federal dollars against it, but that is that's 3 years away. And so that's something that let's make sure that those neighborhoods are okay with that. I don't know if there's alternatives, but they've been waiting a long time. And I think when we secured that grant, they were really excited about it. But that is a long time for them to wait, especially as we continue to see increased cut-through traffic from 29, especially during the South Washington construction when it's gotten really messy out there. My next question is on the sidewalk program. So I think it was in FY22, which is the new budget year we're in now, where we said that the money that was allocated for the LED conversion lights would go back towards standing up a sidewalk program. Are we on track to do that, given that we're 3 months into the new budget year now? 4 months, actually.
Yes, the public works staff are looking at 3 to 4 priority projects to use that funding with, and as you will recall, we have preliminary concepts out there for additional ARPA money to expand. So right now for the current allocation, they're looking at some of the core missing equity sidewalks. So we're looking at finishing South Maple, we're looking at the Tinner Hill from South Washington to the historic site and what's involved there, and also some sidewalks around the Annandale Hillwood area.
Perhaps the CACT could be helpful in that. I know in the past they've been a big advocates for finishing missing link sidewalks, and so if that map is done, that could be a great thing that we get the CACT to help us prioritize as well.
Yes, definitely for the ongoing, this year, this amount of money this year is just 100,000, so we will be efficient and stretch it as far as we can.
Great. Last question's on LED lights, so that's exciting to hear that Lionel will be on this project. He did a great job with the library. We talked about kind of having a pilot street where the lights were going to be on. Do we have that identified yet, and if so, where?
Not yet. Mr. Millard is meeting with Dominion this week for what kind of criteria they have for pilots, and we want to be very judicious where we put it and what we put, because if we don't like it, we have to pay to have it come out. So we are looking at a mix of something on a commercial street, something on a residential street that is a little dark now and the houses aren't right close to the sidewalks and the street lights, and then pick one where it's much closer so that we can judge the brightness, the directional, make sure we can shield lights if it's too close to residential. So we're planning to probably have around 3 and more to come on those exact locations.
Okay. I was wrong. I actually had one more. On the West Falls Church project, so with that $15 million NVTA grant we got, I think Ross and I were both contacted by school board members about pedestrian safety at the Broad, Haycock, and Shreve Road intersection. And we had an idea of whether we can front load some of that grant money so that it can be improving the pedestrian experience, especially seeing the high volume of students we have going to the secondary campus. Has there been any staff work on the feasibility of that?
So there has been. There's been discussion with the development team about that as well. What the current study is, as council is aware, Mustang Alley is to be completed next summer. And so the goal would be to have that be a fully signalized intersection by the beginning of school year with the completion of Mustang Alley. A lot of things need to fall into place for that to happen. The development team has committed to having Mustang Alley finished by then. They are now doing the engineering to see if they can also have that be a fully signalized intersection. They had originally intended that signal would come in later, and so they're studying that, and I think we have our next infrastructure meeting on Wednesday morning, and we'll have more information on that.
Okay, that's good to hear. So I guess assuming they're on track, next school year is about 10 months away. Do we think that there's any interim measures we should implement between now and next school year?
So this is it's a high priority for the city and for the schools working together to have a safe crossing on Haycock. Obviously the crossing guards are crucial to that. They have a limited window while they're there, and so the question is what can be better in terms of design and other things when the crossing guards can't be there.
Yeah.
So we don't have immediate solutions yet, but we are studying it. I think the ultimate solution is that fully signalized intersection, but even to do a hawk signal or things like that takes probably about a year to design those.
I've seen in other jurisdictions
we don't have dollars for that right
like
now.
solar powered kind of flashing lights. So I wonder if that's something that you could just bring in and install kind of in the median in the interim, because I know we've already had one pedestrian incident there involving a student, and I don't really want to be around for the next one. So let's make sure that if there are interim solutions like something solar and portable that we can do in the next 10 months, especially right now in the winter when it's obviously dark by 5 o'clock, we still have students coming home outside of traffic or crossing guard times. And obviously everyone else besides students also deserves safe passage there too. So
Right.
Thank you for the update.
All right, Mr. Lichtenhouse.
A couple questions. Let it cover quite a bit of ground as usual. I want to go back to the Greenway Downs question because 2024 is a ridiculously long time for that to be delivered. Is there anything that could be done in the interim? And again, I'm not as familiar with the mechanics of the money that's coming from outside sources, but is there a way to supplant that money, effectively accomplishing some of the traffic calming with our money and then being reimbursed later? Is it possible for us to expedite some of that work so it all doesn't have to wait and be done in 2024?
A couple initial thoughts, and then I'll take this back to the staff team and we'll see what options. This is federal money, so we have to go through certain VDOT steps and approvals, and the construction add date is sort of like the outside date, so that we don't miss it and get red flagged on their dashboard, which prevents future money. so we can look to see what we can do to move the schedule up. If you choose to use local money, let's say other NTC money that we may not spend as we finish out the other projects, you could elect to do that. You will not get reimbursed for it, though. It'd be a commitment of the local funding, just from the way the VDOT federal funds work. You can't, if you had the local money, then they look for you to use the local money.
Is the federal VDOT money enough to accomplish these projects?
We're in the early stages. We have 636,000. We hope it will be sufficient, but we don't know yet, given the early stages of designing. So we can take it back to our transportation team and our project manager and see if there's any light solutions or things in between. Also, we're just starting the community engagement, and we want to make sure, since it's an NTC project, we go through the council adopted process to make sure we have the right stakeholder agreement as well.
Okay. Yeah, I would ask that we try to find some light solutions we can implement,
Sure.
prior to 2024. I mean, I'm a bit biased because I live closest, I think, to at least the intersection of Oak and Marshall. And, when the school crossing guards are there, it's great. And some of those light solutions that have been implemented have been very effective during the day. But at nighttime, and man, I don't mean to beat up on the pizza delivery drivers, but I swear that's like the Audubon for some of those folks. So, and that's that way with a lot of those streets at night. During the day, it's not quite as dangerous, but similar to the comments that Ms. Hardy made about not wanting to be around the next time we have an incident up there near the high school. I feel the exact same for anybody walking down those streets on the Greenway downside after dark. And so if there's anything that we can do before 2024, I would beg that you guys please find a way to make that happen, because it is dangerous. I've had close calls. I know others have had close calls, and some of them were children as well. And so please find a solution. And then just a question of clarification for a question I have for someone in the community. The South Washington Transit Plaza that's underway, by the way, the brick looks fantastic up and down Washington. That traffic flow going on to Annandale as you're going north on Washington, it takes that kind of right-hand turn. Is that the permanent kind of turn there? Okay. It's a bit sharp. It restricts flow, which frankly is not a bad thing, but I was just curious. That question came up. Okay. So the way the streets are positioned now, that is what it's going to be permanently.
Correct.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you all.
Vice Mayor Connolly?
Thanks, Mayor Charter. Following up on the Greenway Downs questions, because that is where I live. My question is just about community engagement and how we're doing that. And I've asked those questions before in other neighborhoods, but now that I'm in the neighborhood, I'm just wondering, I've heard one thing, that we're maybe getting this together, do you want to be involved? But there hasn't been any other outreach. Is there supposed to have been other outreach from the neighborhood leaders?
Probably not yet, because
Okay.
we've just identified them and just got the contractor on, and the contractor's just looking at all the survey data and some recommendations to develop concept plans for us to bring back to the community. So the initial outreach was from Mr. Sykes soliciting volunteers for each street, and then we made sure we had the right number of people per each street.
Okay.
And Mr. Bradley is still convening weekly NTC meetings, and so this week on Thursday I can check back in with Mr. Bradley and Mr.
Okay.
Sykes. We had talked about, I think it was last week, we talked about getting together another communication just to give people an update as to where we
Right,
are.
I'm just, there have been people who moved in and people who've moved
Yeah.
out, and I'm just concerned that it may get lost in the shuffle with that long time frame.
Yep, we can
And then
do
all of a
that.
sudden something will happen and people say, I didn't know anything about this. So that is one question.
Sure.
And the next one is also about the Washington Street Transit Plaza. As you're turning from Annandale Road southbound then onto Washington Street, you're making that left-hand turn. It's super tight in there too. Is there going to be any kind of median added between those lanes when it gets finally paved?
I see Mr. Bradley is attending the meeting long distance. If he has a technical answer, if not, we can follow up, because I'm not as nuanced
Okay.
with the design plans.
I just keep hearing things from people about how tight it is, and I keep saying, just wait, there's more coming. It's not going to be just like this, but I'm curious about how it is going to be just like this.
Yes, I don't want to speak in super specifics tonight because it's been a minute since I looked at the plans. What I will say is the lane alignment and utilization is generally in its final form. There might be some small tweaks to curb lines here or there, but as far as any medians, additional lanes, anything like that, that is more or less set. So what you see is what it's going to end up at.
But also to slow down traffic and make it less of a free flow, a bit of a larger traffic calming process, but also so people can see and stay in the city, live local, work local, spend local. Thank you, Mr. Bradley.
Mr. Duncan, or did you have more, Vice Mayor Conley? Mr. Duncan?
Thank you. I do think it is a communications opportunity because the public does not really get, I think many folks don't get what we're trying to accomplish by basically getting rid of the slip lanes. You know, there was one at Gundry, we got rid of that. There was one at Roosevelt and Roosevelt, we got rid of that. This one at the intersection the Vice Mayor indicated is meant to be as tight as it is because previously there was absolutely no accommodations for pedestrians on that side of the street at all. There was actually no sidewalks, hard to believe. And we're changing that dramatically. So helping the community understand why we're doing that is useful, I think. I wanted to go back to, if I could, the LED street lights. So I was a little concerned when I read that light fixture temperature, style, and wattage have been finalized. It sounds to me like maybe they haven't quite been finalized, which is to the good. Were we going to do a field trip and take a look at the options? Is that what you're talking about when you talk about a demonstration street or situation?
To date, we have did an internal review for staff for lighting safety with the police so far on all the light design and temperatures. We took that out to boards and commissions for input both on the looks and the lighting and the style. And then we hosted a field trip to the Dominion demonstration site. And now, so per all the adopted guidelines and for looks and feels and recommended general lighting and temperature, that's been selected. Now what we want to do is a pilot test where they're in the field in the City of Falls Church so we can see how they really look and feel. And from that, we can do some tweaking and adjustments.
Okay, so we're a little, I guess I must have missed the field trip. Maybe I was somewhere else that night.
If anybody would like to do it, it's an outdoor Dominion parking lot office, and so we can, just give them a heads up, and you can do a
Well, I
drive-by.
mean, Nine or anyone else up there needs to micromanage, but it just seems to me like it's really an important opportunity not to miss, because our current lighting on the streets, particularly even like downtown, the main intersection where, you're crossing the street to get to Harris Teeter and Zoe's Atelier, that whole, I mean, it's just plain old dark there after the sun goes down. You couldn't see a pedestrian hardly at all because the lighting is so inadequate. And yet, just down the street at Cherry Street and East Broad, it's like daylight 24 hours a day. And the imbalance, same thing's true with West Street and Great Falls, the new intersection there. And, just evening out that imbalance seems to me like the residential corners there that I referred to might be a little dimmer. And the downtowns we need to look a little less like ye old Williamsburg and a little more like what we are, which is a city with people who we want to get across the street safely. So, again, I don't want to micromanage. In that same vein, the reference to the hawk signals on Broad Street, another opportunity that we'll have is when the Falls Church Florist Village Inns of Virginia building is redeveloped, and it is now, I think, underway to be redeveloped. That's going to be a business hub there, and when Harvey's and the new school settle into the Byron, that mid-city area is going to, again, see a lot of pedestrian traffic that we're not seeing now. Is there, as Ms. Hardy indicated, what's the timeline on getting actual hawk signals put up on Broad Street, particularly at that location? Is that like a 2-year thing, or is it 3 years out? I didn't see a date in the documents.
Mr. Bradley, putting you on the spot again, do you have some specifics on the hawk signal? If not, we'll get back on the timing.
Nothing that I can speak to at the level that Mr. Duncan is looking for. So I think we'll have to follow up with council on the timing.
We'll make a note of that, Mr. Duncan, and on the LED lighting, the selection will have it brighter in the commercial areas because of the walkability, and LED lights by their nature will just be brighter. A lot of our older lights just fade over time and are less efficient. So it'll be brighter in the commercials, and then we're looking at a lower level into the residential, but still ensuring those shadows and safety kind of approach, especially in the walkability. And we have had a lot of sort of expertise in designing that, and we've looked at Arlington and like the Dominion site. True test will, when we have some fields, in the city lights, and we'll get some reaction and truth test that.
Okay, great. I don't want my nitpicking to in any way diminish our appreciation for the tremendous amount of work that this document represents here, the staff time, just the sheer effort to try to get it right and involve the community is just really terrific. And as Ms. Hardy said, this is where it all lands. This is local government. This is what we do. And I think we're doing a great job. I would just close with maybe a request is when you move a category or a project into the blue category, as in done, keep a list of those blue done projects because sometimes folks who haven't been here so long, something that happened 3-4 years ago, they have absolutely no awareness of it. And whatever their problem is, they think it's going to take forever to get it fixed, and it'd be helpful if we could demonstrate, a sustained effort in this area and how much money was involved in doing it. I mean, we have a general idea of how much, investment money is in our mixed-use projects. I think the number it's a big number. It's a really big number. But I think that the number of dollars that we're investing in the community and all these good projects is also a very big number. And I think the public should know more about that. Thanks.
Thank you. We certainly can do that, and we are keeping up the CIP map that shows active, pending, and completed. So as a quick snapshot, that's available on the website.
Ms. Hiscott?
Thank you. I think most of the questions that I had have been asked. I just wanted to actually state that as you're working on developing staffing budgets for the next year, that I want to ensure that we are, I look forward to seeing what you put together with regard to contracts and procurement management as we move forward with the ARPA funding and, as we move forward with the new projects we have at West Falls and several of the other projects. I want to make sure that we're staffing to success. So I want to support the great work that you're doing, but expand that as needed and as appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Snyder, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just one other one. In addition to adequate staff to oversee and do the projects, with the new federal infrastructure legislation, the good news is that there's potentially a lot of resources there. The bad news is it probably will take more staff to get it. So I know that's something that we're talking about regionally, but that probably ought to be included in our thinking of the staffing as well to handle the projects online, to speed them up if possible, the ARPA funding and now the federal infrastructure funding. And again, I much appreciate, Cindy, particularly your leadership and all the staff's work. But I think we're going to need more resources to do the job and to get the funds to do even more jobs. So look forward to hearing more about that as we review the staffing needs going forward. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'll just add just a few things, in some ways repeating what my colleague said. One, I think elaborating on what Mr. Duncan just said, but it'd be nice to really push out the word when we finish a project. I don't think we do enough of that, frankly, of just all the good things that are happening, where the tax dollars are going. We know about it here in this room, but I think a lot of folks, unless they see it in their neighborhood, they don't know what's going on. So I think we should really make a concerted effort to make sure the public is better aware of so many of these infrastructure and other projects we're doing. Also, let me ask you about the LED lights. Are we going to have the switch that'll sort of throttle it back at late hours, for example, like Arlington does?
These lights that we selected allow for that to be added on later. The initial cost estimates and the funding we have will not have that installed, but we can retrofit it in.
So how much more is it to retrofit it? I mean, is this substantially more? I mean, I think that what you're going to find is people in their neighborhood, some of those lights, as Mr. Duncan said, cherry, they're really bright. Maybe that light doesn't need to be that bright at midnight, but maybe, 8 o'clock at night it does. And so, to my knowledge, Arlington's had very good success in neighborhood settings and in abutting residential, people where they're living in terms of throttling those lights back later in the evening. So I think it is something we ought to consider, and even if there's an additional cost, it may be worth it for quality of life. So it's something to think about. And also, I would echo Mr. Snyder's comments about infrastructure. I'm not sure we know all the details yet of what's kind of coming with that, but I think there are many opportunities, and if we are nimble, we can help to pay for some of these big-ticket items that we're faced with, like stormwater. So anyway, that's all I've got. Does anyone else have anything else they'd like to add? All right, well, thank you all. Thank you in particular, Ms. Mester. This is great work.
Sure.
Mr. Shields, you want to go on to the next item, the next element of your presentation?
Thank you, and so I'll wrap up the city manager's report with a briefing for the city council and a progress update on the council's 2-year work plan. And I will just note at the outset that this plan was developed in January and February of 2020, before the pandemic, and it is interesting to read through this work plan to see, those things that transcended a global pandemic and that are so important to this day, including the inclusiveness and social equity aspects of the council's work plan and the transportation and walkability aspects of the council work plan, which we've been talking about earlier tonight. In tonight's briefing, I think the place where I will start is just to sort of follow up on Cindy's report. Capital projects were such a crucial part of the council's work plan when this was adopted and developed 2 years ago. And so we're, as we're all aware, but very pleased to report, the Meridian High School, which was first and foremost on the council's agenda to get that successfully completed. It was completed on time and under budget. Much kudos to the school administration and their project management team. But the whole package in terms of the way to pay for it was squarely in the city council's control through this period. And the city council did work very hard. And one of the most challenging aspects of the past 2 years over this work plan period was working with the development team to keep the West Falls project on track, even as they were going through very significant economic sort of dislocation due to the pandemic. The council amended the CA, approved the site plan, and approved the Community Development Authority. And the City Council and the city did basically hit all of our marks in terms of what was being asked of the city. We also celebrated the opening of the Mary Riley Stiles Library after a 14-month construction period, and this project also came in under budget. And we're working right now on the final closeout with Centennial, our contractor, and we'll be providing the council a final closeout report in the coming week. In the area of inclusiveness and social equity, we'll talk about that and affordable housing, which were combined in the council work plan. But in this area, I think the city has, taken a lot of very strong steps, but also set the stage for even stronger steps in the future. The Police Use of Force Committee completed its work this year, and police are implementing its recommendations. On November 22nd, the city police chief will be before the council to provide you an update on that, and also to recognize certain exemplary police officers who have, I think, held those principles of public safety and public guardianship at the highest levels. So we look forward to that on November 22nd. Also, the City Council invited all the city's boards and commissions to engage in social equity and provide recommendations on actions, programs, and policies for the city to adopt to move the city more positively in this direction. Action on these recommendations are proceeding on multiple fronts, and the council's government operations committee will be meeting next week with the city's racial equity action team to also advance these board and commission recommendations as well as other actions. Council funded the Tinner Hill Mural District grant, and those grant applications actually will be presented to the City Council next week with the arts and cultural sort of basket of arts grants that happen at this time of the year. I will also, in the area of affordable housing, I think the city has taken stronger steps in the past 2 years than we have in many years, and also set the stage for, I think, very strong progress in the future. Some of the big steps that were taken was acquiring 3 Virginia Village quadplexes to preserve as affordable housing. This was done in partnership with the Economic Development Authority. The city also approved a new high water mark for affordable housing with the Broad and Washington project at 10% of the total units, 36 units, which are committed for the life of that project. The city applied for and obtained a $3.75 million affordable housing grant, which was focused on home ownership, and that is being finalized right now with Virginia Housing, and we're looking forward in partnership with our partner to begin those acquisitions, put covenants on them, and then resell them as affordable home ownership units soon. And the city just recently applied for an additional $3.75 million grant, which will be targeting rental affordable housing preservation and creation, and look forward to hearing back on that soon. So very significant progress in those areas. In the area of the environment, I'll start with stormwater. Certain projects that have been completed include the Ellison Street stormwater project, the Poplar and Laura stormwater project was completed in September. The Wrens Branch project, we've gotten all of the easements, and that project now is clear to begin construction. Over the summer, the city completed the Trammell Stream crossing under the WNOD so that project can be completed without disturbing the dual trails when that project is finished. The 6 stormwater task force projects are in detailed engineering now, and we're working through the financing of those. We'll talk about that next week in terms of using ARPA dollars to advance those projects. Just 2 weeks ago, the City Council was briefed on the Climate Change Mitigation Community Energy Plan, which is under development and which lay out practical steps for the city to achieve adopted carbon emission reductions. The Meridian High School, which we mentioned just a moment ago, was built to be net zero ready and is LEED Gold. The library is on track to achieve LEED Silver. City Hall achieved LEED Silver. This follows adopted City Council policy and the goals that the City Council has set out. All of the projects that now come before Council for special exceptions are hitting that LEED Gold mark as well. So the city has set that standard, and the private development community is meeting it. Next week, or actually tonight, the City Council will be considering a plastic bag tax, which is not intended so much as a revenue source, but as an incentive to encourage people to move away from single-use plastic bags, which have such a harmful impact on our environment. We spoke just a moment ago about walkability projects and neighborhood traffic calming. Those are really very central to the council's work plan, and staff, I think, has been working very hard to advance those projects in the recent months as well. So I'm very pleased to give this report. I will sort of close things out also in terms of the area of responsible and accountable governance, and say 2 things in this. One is that the council was able to reduce, with all of these accomplishments, was able to reduce the property tax rate by 3 cents with FY22 budget in response to much public comment that was received, and also adopting a responsible budget for the current fiscal year. And throughout this entire pandemic, the council and staff have taken leadership positions with the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, and Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, and played, I think, objectively, a significant role in the coordinated response to the pandemic, in advancing transportation planning for the region, for helping the region move forward on climate change, stormwater, and social equity, and racial equity as well. So very pleased to provide this 2-year report and happy to answer any questions.
All right, well, thank you very much. There's a lot of, when you say it like that, there is a lot of good stuff that's happened the past couple of years. So thank you for refreshing our recollection and for the great work you and your staff have provided over these past 2 years. Ms. Hardy, did you have a question or comment?
I do, but I'm happy to let someone else go.
All right, well, is anyone else who would like to go before Ms. Hardy goes? Mr. Duncan.
I'll go first for once. This is great stuff. I guess just as I look through all the great things we're doing, I want to make sure that, you know, the things that aren't mentioned here are not things that we haven't worked on. It's just maybe they haven't risen to the level of getting mentioned yet. And I think particularly about another issue that we've heard a good bit lately from letters and comments I know my colleagues have heard, and that's our city employees and how hard they have worked in the whole time that this report covers, and how we are very, I hope, we're hopeful that we'll be able to recognize that in their compensation packages in the very near future. I don't want to commit anybody to anything here tonight, but I did want to put down a marker that, you know, we're aware that pay was frozen. There was a bonus. We did get that. That's good. But pay was frozen, and we'd like to, I hope, remedy that. The ARPA money affords us an opportunity to do some premium pay particularly for the frontline workers who are exposed. And right now, because of good management and a strong economy and some good luck, we believe that our revenue situation heading into the next fiscal year is going to be good, and therefore we want to I just want to make sure that our city employees know that we appreciate all they've done, and we're mindful of them just as we are of all the things that you mentioned, the good things we've done, the reduction of the property tax rate, very significant. The employees just need to know that we're thinking of them too, and we're going to try to do our best by them in the very near future. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Mr. Duncan. Ms. Hardy?
Thank you. So really echo, I think, the comments that you made at the beginning, Mr. Shields, when you talked about how it was really amazing to see all these priorities really transcended kind of the worldwide pandemic, and 18 months later, these are still very much priorities for the community. On that note, though, I know that this is maybe the first month where we happen to align both the CIP update and this work plan update, and I realize there's a lot of redundancy, and I want to make sure that I'm cognizant of the amount of work that this takes you and the rest of your staff. And so in the vein of how do we work smarter but not harder, if it makes sense to align them on that quarterly basis, it's great, but I don't want you guys to have to do double the amount of work. So maybe we can think of a good way to organize this so you give us the updates that we want, but not have to produce multiple reports for us. I'm certainly open to that. A couple things that I wanted to ask about. On stormwater, I wanted to be responsive to Mr. Thompson and the rest of the Broadway folks. And so I know obviously the big 6 projects are things that are on both the CIP and our work plan as things that are important. How do we prioritize projects beyond the big 6? Because I think there were things that were outside the scope of what the Stormwater Task Force considered. I imagine the Broadway project's not the only one that didn't get prioritized. And so those aren't the only important things, but those are the ones that were prioritized by the task force. It's not an answer that we need now, but it is something that I think we should think about, especially looking at our schedule. November 15th, the Public Utilities Commission that I think we're going to stand up to help take care of stormwater going forward. That feels like a really good topic for them to handle, is how do we cover all those other areas of the city? Because I think it's important for us to acknowledge that just doing the big 6 is not enough. There's probably other areas that we need to retrofit and upgrade as well. And along the same lines, I think both Ross and I have talked about in the past how important it is to make sure we take care of the upstream policy around stormwater, right? So it's not only important to create more gray infrastructure or more pipes, but if you're just sending more runoff from especially residential redevelopment, then we're only just creating more problem for those same pipes. So I think as we look at the next tier work plan, having kind of a stronger upstream policy on what residential redevelopment is like, as well as incentives for homeowners to do more with stormwater retention, whether it's the VPAS Rain Smart program, the city tax credit program. I feel like there's a lot we should do upstream, and it's not just the gray infrastructure downstream. And while we're on the note about commission, I'd like to make a specific request for the city staff group on equity to consider the Race and Equity Commission that we heard from lots of residents about last week. If we are standing up a stormwater commission, and that's something we've heard loud and clear is important, I think equity is just as important and hopefully something that can be an ongoing commitment. Finally, as we kind of think about what our priorities are for the next 2 years, I wholeheartedly support what Phil just talked about around employee pay, not just kind of the one-time thing that we can do with ARPA and the surplus, but really making a bold declaration that we want to reinvest in our employees and what that looks like over, for example, a 3 or 4 year plan. I think very similar to what the schools did 4 or 5 years ago around wanting to make sure that we boost teacher pay. I'd like to do something similar on the city side as well. So hopefully that's something that my colleagues can join us in. And then the last note is really around climate. I think that's where we are with climate is kind of where I think we were with affordable housing a couple of years ago. It was all something that we all believed was important. We all said we supported it, but we didn't really have anything bold or decisive until recently. I think that's where we need to be with climate change. I would love to see city staff and council partner on something out there. I think Ithaca, New York last week declared they were the first city in the U.S. to decarbonize. And I think I joke that it's totally okay for us to be number 2. That is the kind of action that I'd like to see us take going forward, and hopefully we can talk about a lot more at a retreat in the next couple months. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Are there other comments from anyone about our work plan? Okay, there'll be some time. Vice Mayor Connolly?
I do. Just a quick comment, and that is, as you say, why it is amazing to look at all the items on that work plan, and I think back to that retreat we had in January, February of 2020, and all the ideas that we had and what we distilled down and how much progress has been made on almost every single area. So kudos to staff and to everyone else for making that happen. And then I also agree with Letty on the stormwater issues and the Broadway's concerns and others that haven't made that big 6. How will we address those individuals as we go forward? Those individuals and those blocks and neighborhoods and communities, because stormwater is more than just a one street situation. And then there are several things that we have talked about and they've come up and then we've never gone any further, and that is, one is ranked choice voting. We talked about, we had the ability to enact that, and there was going to be some kind of briefing on what that meant, and it would be great to have something coming up soon on ranked choice voting and on collective bargaining. Because as we talk about rewarding staff, is collective bargaining something that staff would like to engage in, and we need to know more about it before we could even begin to talk about it. So I would ask for some briefings on those as well.
All right, thank you. Anything else, or should we move on actually to the business on the agenda, which we have not yet started? So unless there's anything else, why don't we go ahead and move on, as I said, Madam Clerk, to the business on the agenda. Will you call the first item?
Yes, we have on second reading and public hearing TR 21-30, resolution to name the city property at 7100 Gordon Avenue as the Robert L. Goff property yard.
Mr. Shields?
Well, thank you. This is one that is an opportunity to recognize an employee that has touched so many people in the community with his dedication and hard work and commitment. This is Robert Goff is an employee that started with the city as a maintenance worker and rose up through the ranks to be our superintendent of operations. And so he is essentially, for all of the people who work in operations, one of their own who I think represents the whole team in an exemplary way. This matter was referred out by the City Council on September 27th to boards and commissions for comments, and specifically by code requirement to the Historical Commission and to the Planning Commission and to the Rec and Parks Advisory Board. We have received positive recommendations from the Historical Commission and an expression of particular thanks to Robert Goff for his support for the work of the Historical Commission through the years, and also a motion in support by the Planning Commission thanking Robert Goff for his service to the city. The Rec and Parks Advisory Board did defer action on this because this is not a Rec and Parks facility, and so they viewed it as outside of their portfolio. So those are the reports from our boards and commissions. We've been very pleased with the feedback that we've received from this proposal. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, any questions? Mr. Lichtenhouse.
I don't have a question. I fully support this, and I support passing this, and I hope that it inspires Mr. Goff to come back and work full-time, not just on a project basis. So purely for that reason, I would like to make a motion.
All right.
I'd like to make a motion that we pass and adopt TR 21-30 resolution to name the city property yard at 7100 Gordon Road as the Robert L. Goff Operations Yard.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Hiscott on the second. Any public comment? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Is there any additional comment anyone would like to make? All right, Madam Clerk.
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Lickenhouse?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter.
Yes,
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Council.
thank you. Next item.
Yes, we have another second reading and public hearing on TR 21-33, resolution requesting the General Assembly to amend Section 4.14, appointments of the Charter of the City of Falls Church to replace qualified voter status criteria with age of at least 18 years.
All right. Mr. Shields?
Ms. Mester, if you could report on this.
Thank you. This item is here before you for the public hearing and final adoption as read by the city clerk. It has been discussed at work session and also at a regular meeting when you authorize the required public hearing. The staff report and the charter amendment language has not changed since council has reviewed it. We did clarify with the city attorney's assistance the definition of residency, and if this is enacted, then all of the applications and processes would be updated to reflect this. Senator Saslaw and Delegate Simon are on standby to formally submit this for a charter amendment before the General Assembly. Should council approve this, I will submit it to them by tomorrow, which still gives them 2 weeks before their deadline to have it formally drafted and put in for General Assembly consideration and action. With that, glad to answer any questions and seek your direction.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments? Do we have a motion?
Mayor, I move to adopt TR 21-33.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Hiscott on the second. Any public comment? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Madam Clerk.
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Lickenhouse?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Council.
All right, next item, please.
Yes, we have on first reading TO 21-14, ordinance to amend Chapter 40 taxation of the Falls Church City Code to add a new Article 20 to impose a tax on the use of certain plastic bags.
Mr. Shields?
Thank you, Mayor Tarter. As the clerk has read, this is a proposal to have a 5-cent tax on single-use plastic bags. Mr. Zach Bradley is on this call, and the city's solid waste coordinator, Lonnie Marchetti, is also on this call. She took a lead in researching this, along with Kate Walker, the city's environmental coordinator. Mr. Bradley, if you would like to provide a summary of the staff report, you and Ms. Marchetti, and then we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Shields. First, I want to thank Ms. Marchetti and Ms. Walker for assembling this. Admittedly, there aren't many changes to the first part of this. The staff report section is pretty consistent with what was presented a couple of weeks ago. That said, this does propose new ordinance language to be added into the city's codified ordinances that outline the 5-cent bag tax. As previously discussed, retailers can retain 2 cents until January of 2023, at which point in time they can retain 1 cent. This would be collected by the state tax commissioner and then distributed back to us. And as Mr. Shields had alluded to earlier, this is less of a revenue stream and very much focused on the reduction of single-use plastic bags for environmental benefits. It is very consistent with surrounding communities in the vein of what the NVTC was aiming for, and the coordination with Fairfax County, Arlington County, City of Alexandria, so on and so forth. So this applies to all the same businesses. It's structured very much the same, other than maybe some small nuances that make it so that it fits City of Falls Church or City of Alexandria. Probably the biggest difference is just that we are a couple of months behind our surrounding jurisdictions, so this does take effect a little bit after that. But other than that, pretty standard. We're going to be mimicking all of our surrounding jurisdictions. So with that, I'll hand it over to Ms. Marchetti, if she's still with us, to see if she has anything to add.
Thank you, Zach. So we are essentially, like Zach said, we are going to be roughly about 3 months behind our neighboring jurisdictions of Arlington, Fairfax, and City of Alexandria. The main reason why is we were waiting on very pertinent information that the tax department did not release until early September of this year. So once we gathered that information, we immediately worked very closely with NVRC. We are the first of our jurisdiction size to bring this forward. There's no other current size of our jurisdiction that is bringing this and essentially moving forward along with our larger neighboring jurisdictions. The earliest we can enact, if council approves, this ordinance is going to be April 1st. We must provide a signed copy of the ordinance 3 months in advance, but per the law, we cannot, it must be each quarter. So the first quarter of 2022 would be January, and unfortunately we would miss that window. So the first available time frame we would be able to enact this ordinance would be April 1st of 2022. Any questions?
Thank you. So, let's see, where do I begin with this? Plastic bags drive me nuts because I see them everywhere. I do understand the environmental implications and think that we can certainly do better. What frustrates me about this particular ordinance, or I should say the reasoning behind it, is that I want to make sure that there are proper alternatives at these places for folks who may not be bringing their own reusable bags. So my question is, one, let me just say I do support the notion of reducing certainly as many single-use plastics as we absolutely can. Those things are wreaking havoc on the environment. But what I do want to know is that, because I was just in D.C. actually last week, and I had to run into a hardware store and buy about 7 or 8 different things, and I didn't have like a reusable tote. And they didn't offer paper bags, and so I had to take a plastic bag, and they charged 5 cents for it. It's 5 cents, I get it, but it was annoying that there wasn't an alternative. So my question is, for the 21 stores here in town, do we have kind of a reciprocal requirement that they offer an alternative to a plastic bag if folks are not able to bring in a tote, because some people are shopping from out of town and they don't carry the reusable totes in their bags to be able to take items out of the store that they've purchased?
So currently we are working on sending a letter to all the affected 20 businesses. That letter that we are referencing will be translated, so that will take a little bit of time for that to happen. But in turn, we will also be asking affected businesses to fill out a survey. The survey will essentially ask the questions aligned with NBRC, because we did a regional survey, to essentially ask, do they provide these bags? If they do, great. If they don't, what steps can we work on to get this type of program in place? If they're unable to purchase reusable bags for the time being, because we are essentially a couple months before, fingers crossed, this becomes active, then the city, we have already purchased reusable bags that we can essentially offset. But the main purpose for the reusable bags that we purchased was for SNAP or WIC benefits, or beneficiaries, excuse me.
There's absolutely no incentive for those businesses to offer any type of alternative for folks that don't bring their own reusable bag. And the way that I read this is that they get to keep a portion of the tax to help offset the cost of having to implement the collection of these taxes. And so if the businesses are keeping a portion of the tax and are not forced to offer an alternative, it seems to me like we're taking tax money from consumers to give back to the businesses, who in turn don't have to do anything to help further this program, if I'm reading it correctly.
To a certain extent, you are reading it correctly. The main purpose of this, obviously, is to reduce litter. However, I'm sorry?
Get that. I 100% understand.
Right, but essentially the money that is given back to, or the money that is, for the retailers to be able to keep the portion, is to essentially either hire, IT people or whatever the case may be. Majority of the businesses that are affected within the city are essentially small business owners. We are more than willing to help offset, offset is not the correct word. We are more than willing to help in any way that we can possibly help them. But unfortunately, without sending out the survey, we won't know how many of those affected businesses will be, affected by this, and what additional help we can possibly provide for them at this time.
Because maybe I'm reading this incorrectly. It seems to me like most of the businesses that would be affected by this are not small local businesses, but they're actually probably national larger chains, because isn't this restricted to pharmacies, drugstores, and grocery stores?
Correct. But we'll say correct. So for example, 7-Eleven will be affected. So will Good Fortune. But there are also smaller grocery stores. For example, there's a halal market, which is considered a grocery store because it falls within the parameters, but they're not considered a Giant or a Harris Teeter, if that makes any sense.
It does. But I mean, if you think about this from a practical perspective, this is really impacting the national retail chains. And again, there is no incentive here for them to offer an alternative, and they get to keep a portion of the money. It's kind of like going to surgery with a machete as opposed to a scalpel. I mean, you're going to have some intended effect, but it's going to be really, really messy. That's the way that I read this. And it's not that I'm against it. So here's my solution, as opposed to complaining about what we now, I guess Richmond is the one that's given us the authority to do this right now, right? Okay. And typical of language like that, again, it's very broad in its brushstrokes, but misses some of the finer points to actually affect the change that we want. So I am, without providing the stick aspect to have those businesses offer an alternative, and a practical alternative at that, and absent not giving them money to offset this without offering that alternative, I feel like this would not have the intended maximum effect that we want, which is to cut down on single-use plastic, and plastic bags are one of the biggest perpetrators. Do we have the ability locally to require those affected businesses to carry alternatives, even if it's to purchase a tote or to provide paper bags? It drives me nuts when I go to Harris Teeter and I've got to search through the checkout lines to find the paper bags so I can use those as an alternative to plastic, but they're far and few between if I'm not carrying a reusable tote. Do we have that ability?
I would defer to the the city attorney.
I think it will be. I would want to go back and take a look at the statute again, but it's a fairly specific statute, which is exactly that's why everybody's ordinance is the same, and ours would be the same, and it does not have a provision for that. I will do a little work to look and see if we could find some way, but I do not think that it offers that kind of option right now.
Do we have the ability then, if we're not going to use the stick approach, to affect the change with those larger retailers? And again, I'm thinking primarily of supermarkets. Do we have the ability to affect the change through offering an incentive? So if they get to keep some of the money, can we ask them to give someone a discount in turn that shows up to use something that is an alternative to a plastic bag?
I don't think that we do. Again, it's a statute that is unusually prescriptive in terms of exactly how it works. So I can take another look, but it's very prescriptive about how much the business gets to keep to offset the costs of tracking the tax, it doesn't leave us any room to make any different types of arrangements.
Okay. I don't want to turn a mountain into, or a molehill into a mountain, but this is the type of legislation that just frustrates the heck out of me, because I get it's well intended, but it is absolutely not well thought out. And again, I'm not talking about staff here locally. I'm talking about the way Richmond has prescriptively diagnosed this problem and then the alternatives that they've given us. And so, I will hesitantly support it because we don't have another option. And while it's not perfect, it may have some of the intended effect, but it's certainly not going to have the maximum effect that it could have had if folks have just thought it through a little bit more. And so while the survey and the messaging, Lonnie, I appreciate you guys reaching out to the local businesses to do that. I would ask that we find every way possible to think about how we can have the businesses offer those alternatives as opposed to levying a tax, keeping some of it, and then them not having to really do anything to offer an alternative to that. That would be my request. I don't know what that answer is. Hearing Carol talk, it doesn't sound like we have a whole lot of authority, which also does not surprise me. And Lonnie, I appreciate this is not to rain on you guys in the effort, because I certainly get it. It's just reading through this, it's a very ineffective way to only get us like 10% of the way there, and this could have been solved in Richmond if someone had actually stepped up and tried to solve the problem as opposed to providing this like half-baked, diluted alternative. So in any event, that's my soapbox on the 5-cent plastic bag issue.
All right, thank you. Who else wants to make comment? Ms. Hardy.
Hi, Lonnie. So I know that you said April 1st is the earliest we can implement. I read from the staff report that we still plan on joining the regional communication effort.
Correct.
So there will just be one campaign for all of Northern Virginia. Some localities will start January 1st, some will start April 1st or later.
So when I say a quote unquote regional campaign, meaning that we have all agreed on what the face of the campaign will look like. So we are working together. The NVRC, we have saved a little bit of money to hire a graphic designer. We just agreed on the wording that we will essentially transfer onto window clings, counter clings. We also voted on what type of message or picture that we will essentially put on all of our reusable bags. So that is what I say about the regional effort. Fairfax, Arlington, and City of Alexandria, they have essentially, while everyone's messaging is essentially the same, we've all kind of branched off and kind of done our own thing. So Alexandria did the survey, which, they have way more businesses than we do. We only have 20 affected businesses. But since we are such a small locality, I felt as though that was the best position for us to take. I'm not 100% sure what Arlington and Fairfax County did for their type of research, but that is what I mean by regional, is that our outreach, the bulk of it essentially looks the same coming from different counties in local towns and cities.
How a consumer might hear about it, right? So assuming that the large jurisdictions do move on this for January 1st and everyone hears about the new plastic bag tax, I think our residents and people who patronize their businesses only benefit from hearing about it because they'll just assume that when they come to Harris Teeter that they might have to pay for something, pay 5 cents on a bag, even if they won't get charged till April. So I think even if we're following 4 months later than I'd like to, ideally be on that same timeline. I don't think it's a terrible thing because it just gives people who patronize businesses in Falls Church more of an early heads up, especially if there's going to be lots of communication and we all have the same look and feel in terms of the PR that goes out.
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments from anyone? Mr. Duncan?
Maybe this is in the document and I just haven't seen it. So the 20 stores in Falls Church, they're going to have to do this, or are they, if they're national chains or regional chains, are they going to be clued in that they're in the city of Falls Church? I mean, heck, half of them don't even know where they are. I mean, they think they're in the county already.
Yes, so part of the outreach that we did as a regional effort through the NVRC is that we targeted larger chains, CVS, Giant, Harris Teeter, Safeways, and what we did was we sent out essentially the same survey that we will send out. A couple questions will be tweaked to our specific jurisdiction, but we sent it out to regional managers or specific directors, supervisors that oversee our general area. So we did send it out to quite a few top chains. We did not, unfortunately, get the smaller mom and pop shops, if you will. So the larger chain and franchises should know that this is coming down the pike.
They might actually know that they're in the city of Falls Church, but the regionals or nationals, or there's some central computer somewhere in Loudoun County that runs their whole operation. Are they really going to customize it to Falls Church for the 3 months it takes us to get on board?
So like I said, I'm currently working on a letter. I will be sending it over to communications to get it translated. With that will be the survey, and with the list that I received from the Commissioner of Revenue that fall within the parameters of the 20 identified businesses, they will then be identified, and then we can work one-on-one essentially to try to figure out, to make sure that they understand what's coming down the pike, that they are affected, that they are within the city of Falls Church.
Good luck with that. I mean, past experience has shown us that in collection of our taxes, there are some jurisdictions that pay us because they think they're supposed to, and the other way around. They don't pay us because they think they're in the county. So, I mean, the world wouldn't end if they started collecting they started adhering to your new regime on the 1st of January anyway, but it's just, in terms of communicating, we just want to make sure that people here in the city know that there might be some slippage of that hope for deadline.
And if needed, since there are only 20 businesses, I can physically, go to the businesses if I hadn't heard back or they had not responded in a timely manner to the survey. I can always stop in and speak to the store supervisor or manager at the time.
All right, unless there are any other questions, Mr. Snyder.
Just very quickly, I think Councilmember Lichtenhouse raises some very interesting questions. And then you have the question about, well, so to meet the one issue of providing the alternative, you're also imposing an additional burden on small businesses. So this is the kind of thing where we're going to really need to be careful, survey folks, and I appreciate the one-on-one outreach that we'll have with all of the potentially affected businesses. We might also see what we can learn from other jurisdictions that have had some experience with this. I know DC has had it for a while, only to determine what did they learn from that process that might be relevant to us. So I'm going to support this to move forward on an environmental basis, but I think there are a number of nuts and bolts here that we're going to have to really take a look at going forward. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Vice Mayor Connolly.
Just 2 questions, Ms. Marchetti. We're not banning plastic bags, right? There still will be plastic bags in stores. We're just
Correct.
people are just going to be charged 5 cents for them.
Correct.
Okay, so that's the first one, and I think that's important to note that people aren't going to be forced to walk out the door with all their vegetables in their hands if they forget their reusable bags. Then I'm looking at the Fairfax ordinance and line 48, which is item C. It seems to say, and maybe I'm wrong, but it says any retailer that retains a discount pursuant to this section shall account for it in the form of a deduction when submitting his tax return. Does that apply to if a business says you get a 5 cents off for bringing your own bag, they can still keep that incentive?
No, so that, if I understand what part you were reading, I personally do not have it open. I do apologize. If you want to give me one moment, I can pull it up. I'm sorry, what line?
48, letter C.
I
know
have it on,
It's the Fairfax County one, but they're all
on each other.
it's on the screen if that's helpful now.
No, so that is in pursuant to if, I'm sorry, I might have read that wrong. Retail return. No.
Simply how they do their accounting of the 2 cents that they retain. I think this is really talking about that how they record it on their tax return. So it's really, it doesn't change any of the substance of the ordinance, which is again a 5 cent tax with 2 cents in the first year withheld by the store. This is just how do you account for the amount you withheld to keep yourself.
So this is the Fairfax one, which is very similar to ours and very similar to Arlington, very similar to Alexandria. So Mr. Lickenhouse mentioned either an incentive or something to encourage people to have people bring their own bags, that extra 5 cents off if you bring your own bag, which would be like a 10-cent savings for people to bring their own bag and not use a plastic bag. But that's not even contemplated in there. That's just an individual choice that a business might have.
That's correct. When the statutory authority that is given to a local government is as prescriptive as this is, generally that's the one way you can do it, and you don't have choices about doing it all however you want. When they give you broad authority that's not prescriptive, you have choices in the reasonable means and methods of doing it. But that's not left open here.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
All right, anything else? Any public comments? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Do we have a motion?
Move to grant first reading to TO 21-14, schedule a public hearing and second reading for December 13th, 2021, and authorize advertisement of the same according to law.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Lickenhouse?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Shields? Or Madam Clerk, will you call the next item?
Yep, sure. We have TR 21-38, resolution of support for an administrative update to the Affordable Dwelling Unit Program eligibility criteria to remove citizenship requirements.
Mr. Shields?
It came up through the Housing Commission and as a request from council that the city look at its ADU policies with respect to the citizenship requirement to participate in that program. Staff did research on that, and it was determined that that's a provision that was added not as a council mandate back in the 2000s, but rather as a staff rule that was related to some federal guidelines that were in place at that time. City staff is recommending that we take the citizenship requirement out of the ADU program. We've actually already, since that was an administrative rule, have already taken steps to do so administratively. But this is an opportunity for the council to weigh in on this policy and also to endorse that change as well. And so the action would be to endorse it by resolution. Happy to answer any questions.
Got it. So it's already been changed administratively, at least according to quote your books. And so this is sort of confirmation, public confirmation by council.
That's correct.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments about this, Ms. Hardy?
Thank you. I think we've talked about this plenty, and I wholeheartedly support it. My question is really around how are we letting people know? In the staff report, it mentions that a mailing was sent to residents who may be interested. I guess, did we mail all 15,000 residents in Falls Church, or how are we communicating about that?
So Ms. Lewis is still on this call, and let me ask her if she has information on that, on how this is being communicated.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
About it, because I noted in the staff report that a mailing was sent to residents. Are we planning to let everybody in the city know, or like what? How are we getting the word out?
We translated it and we took it to residents in the fields, and so we plan to put it on the city website, and we also are reaching out to our usual contacts to let them know about the new policy, and so we plan to get the information out that way.
Communication, hopefully the news press can help us publicize this as well, because a lot of people who might need housing help we may not have relationships with them already, so let's make sure we get this, if we do adopt this tonight and affirm what the staff change has done, that we get the message out to everybody. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Hiscott?
I'm sure that you already have them on your list, but I just ask that the school social workers who work with a lot of those families that come in for our great school system are up to date on this and can communicate that to their group as well.
All right, thank you.
There aren't, well, can I make a motion?
Sure.
Move to adopt the TR 21-38.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Hardy on the second. Any public comment? Seeing none, the matter is closed to the public. Ms. Heath?
Yes, Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Lickenhouse?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Let's move on now to the consent agenda. Mr. Shields?
There's one item on the consent agenda, and that is an amendment to the agreement with the Friends of the Falls Church Homeless Shelter, and that is to change the opening date from November 15th to December 1st.
All right, is there any comment or anyone wish to remove that from the consent agenda?
I move to adopt the consent agenda.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Snyder on the second. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Lickenhouse?
Yes.
Ms. Shantz Hiscott?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on to business not on the agenda or standing and regional committees or council liaison reports. Mr. Snyder?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. There's already been some discussion about the work of the Legislative Committee, and I thank the members of the committee. One thing that we wanted to just sort of get the council's impression of is that we have in the recent past been asked by our state senator for sort of high priority items that might qualify for particular grants or funding of one kind or another. And we were thinking of this time asking for up to $15 million that would include funding for stormwater, funding for ADUs, and funding for transportation, pedestrian and bicycle traffic calming type work. And we just wanted, the Legislative Committee just wanted to get a sense of the council if that would be an agreeable ask. Now, we all know that there's no certainty on this, but in case the request is made, that we would be prepared to respond to it quickly. So I'd ask Cindy Mester, because she has done such a great job with our legislative program, if she had any additional comments.
That's, you think you summarized the discussion of the legislative committee well. It would be put together sort of as an infrastructure resiliency project, and then we'll see how it progresses through the General Assembly process, January 2022.
And the reason why we're asking for it now is that request might come before the normal approval of our legislative program. I'd invite Debbie or Phil Duncan to make any comments about it at this point, both on the legislative committee.
Thanks for the opportunity, but I think you summarized it pretty well, and look forward to hearing what our other colleagues' feedback is.
All right, comments from other folks? Sounds pretty good to me. It's going to be a challenge probably with the change in administration, so.
Yeah, no comments on that, but yeah, we have been asked sometimes in the past, and so we wanted to be prepared if we get a similar ask. So anyway, thanks very much. We'll move forward accordingly. I want to thank the other members of the legislative committee. I think it'll be an interesting year, and I think we'll have a good package going in. And it'll be up for council approvals when the first meeting in December.
Yeah, work session on the 15th next week, and then the choice is either November 22nd or December 13th. I'm leaning towards the 13th so we can see how things unfold a little bit closer to the next governor's budget and legislative positions of the governor-elect. But by December 13th, council will need to act on the legislative program.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. And other, we've got minutes here to go through. I don't know if, Mr. Duncan, you want to go ahead and get your thoughts?
Can we have a couple of comments before?
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
I just wanted to thank staff, planning development staff, for giving up their Saturday morning for the East End Area Plan meeting, which was very well attended, and as always, a substantive and lively discussion. So thanks for that. I wanted to make sure that now that 5 to 11s are eligible to be vaccinated and are being vaccinated, that they are included in the city's count of vaccines, and hopefully our number will begin to climb significantly as that cohort, of which we have a good many here in our city, are vaccinated. Commend my colleagues' attention to the remarks and address, really, made yesterday by Tim Stevens on our planning commission to the VPAS fall meeting regarding climate change and what we can do here in Falls Church. It was really a fine, comprehensive essay, and he sent me a copy. I'll forward it to the clerk, and I would recommend it for your reading. I think that's all that I had. If we want to move to minutes, I'm prepared to spend a minute or two on that.
All right, let's spend a minute or two on minutes.
Okay. So for the meeting of February the 8th, Ms. Clerk, lines 22 and 24, this is a recurring theme. There's just a hitch there. The word be accepted and word be forwarded needs to be changed to whatever you want to change it to. And on line 39, more affordable housing at the Broad and Washington project. I'll give you these papers that I'm reading from, so if you don't get everything I say, you can catch up to it later. And if I can just do them all at once, is that all right?
Yeah, why don't you give them all at once? I'm going to ask the city attorney, can we do a motion for all of them at once, or do we have to do them one by one?
I think you could do a motion for all of them.
Okay.
As amended, you
So
can reflect that.
Mr. Duncan?
When I'm done, my motion is going to be to recommend approval as corrected. So for the meeting of March the 8th, again, line 22 and 24, the word be hiccup. Line 39, Gresham Place homeowners. I think homeowners is a plural, so it doesn't need to be the one homeowner association. And the same thing on line 42 for the Whittier Park Homeowners Association. And on line 145, Hold it. Mr. Duncan said. Yeah, you got there. Okay. And line 174, if the staff returned, or if staff returned, maybe. Anyway, there's one more word that needs to be. And on line 203, the decibel levels were changed to a reasonable level. And on line 256, you caught this. The time indicated is not 5:30 to 7:30, but 5:30 p.m. to 10:30 p.m., correct? And line 341, sorry. Commitment to promote local artists. All right, for the meeting of May 24th, 2021, line 22 and 24, the word B, hiccup again. Line 94, 96. The quote that's in italics ends before Ms. Bawa reviewed the staff report, should not be included in line 94. That duplicates at line 96. And finally, for the minutes of September 13th, 2021, line 31, again, the Homeowners Association. I think it should be homeowners, plural or apostrophe, but not singular. All right, with those changes, I move adoption of the minutes of the meetings that we've just gone through as corrected.
Second.
Vice Mayor on the second. I'm just going to do a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. Is there any other comments anybody wants to make before we adjourn? All right, let's do it. We're adjourned. How about that? Good evening.